Hello, my name is Cameron Shaw, and the title of my chapel talk is The Prevalence and Harm of Slut Shaming Today. In today's world, being woke and politically correct is incredibly important, and most people would not admit to slut shaming at the risk of being canceled or deemed a sexist. However, many of us do so unknowingly. Slut shaming is defined by Christine L. Hackman, a professor in the kinesiology department at California Polytechnic State University, as, quote, the tradition of besmirching women for presumed sexual activity, end quote. Although it may seem that slut shaming is a thing of the past, it is actually nauseously prevalent today in various forms such as modern day language about sex, sexual double standards, and the language of health surrounding sexuality. These subtle forms of slut shaming have a deleterious effect on girls' self-confidence and individuality. The language society uses around sexuality objectifies girls and shames them for their desires, making them more likely to be victims of sexual assault, depression, and eating disorders. Charis Cramere and Wei Zhang, experts on gender and language, explain that when talking about sex, people typically use invasive and aggressive words, which imply that sex is, quote, something that men do to women, end quote, and have a violent connotation. This leads girls to believe that their sexual desires are deviant or unnatural and that they should be ashamed of them. Young women become isolated and less likely to report instances of sexual assault. Leora Tannenbaum, an expert on the social phenomenon of slut shaming, points out that these women are not only less likely to report, but, quote, once a girl or woman is regarded as a slut or hoe, she becomes a target for sexual assault, end quote, because abusers know that the ostracized girl is less likely to come forward or be believed about her assault. If the girl does try to report, quote, she may be assigned the slut or hoe identity ex post facto to rationalize the crime and to protect the assaulter, end quote. Another subtle way slut shaming presents itself today is a sexual double standard between boys and girls, where boys are encouraged to be sexually active and girls are shamed for it. Hackman points out that, quote, women who are sexually active receive negative reputations, while men are excused for sexual assertiveness, end quote. As a result, boys are allowed more personal freedom because guardians do not feel the need to prevent or protect them from having sex. The language of health reinforces this double standard. As girls grow up, they are taught that having multiple sexual partners puts them at risk of pregnancy, cervical cancer, and sexually transmitted diseases, but this is not part of the narrative for boys, for whom sexual activity is seen as healthy, natural, and inevitable, if not tacitly applauded. These ideas are reinforced in schools through misguided sex education classes and school dress codes. Many sex education classes teach that boys are naturally more interested in sex and have difficulty controlling themselves, expecting girls, quote, to be the gatekeepers of their sexual behavior and reputation, end quote, according to Cramere and Zhang. Carrie L. Pickle and Rachel A. Gentry, who work with the Department of Psychological Science at Ball State University, point out that, quote, school dress codes mostly target girls, putting the burden on them to avoid wearing clothing that would be distracting to boys and allowing boys to evade responsibility, end quote. In an effort to counter slut shaming, there is a movement to reclaim the word slut. Supporters believe that by taking back the word, they will be able to take away its power and prevent some of the negative effects. However, the solution is unfortunately not so simple. Even if girls and women are able to reclaim the word and remove some of the pain associated with it, they are still being forced to base their sexualities around societal expectations and will continue to be stereotyped based on their expression of their sexuality. Until society can view girls as complex and individual beings separate from their sexuality, slut shaming will always be present and harmful. Thank you, and that concludes today's session of Chapel Talks.